Okay, hello again, and we're going to talk about audio processing here. This is something you have done already. Some of these things you have done already in the projects you have been working on, but we're going to talk about them specifically today and get into some of the particulars there about audio processing. So, there we go. That's where we need to be. Our conversation here is based on the textbook Digital Audio Production by Donald W. Conley, the third edition. Audio processing is, you could think of it as the icing on the cake of an audio production. It's the little finishing touches that you put on. It may correct a small problem, or it may add an artistic or creative touch to your production. But remember, a poor recording is a poor recording, and the processing cannot save it. And in particular, if it is distorted, if the amplitude is much too high, then the recording cannot be rescued. So let's look at a video here. I'm not going to play all of this for you, but we'll watch the first part of it, and this touches on several different aspects of audio processing.
And reduce numbers if the effect is making your audio sound. Well, hey everybody, my name is Nathaniel Dodds from tutvid.com. Welcome into this Adobe Audition tutorial where we're going to talk about making your voice and just generally making your audio sound better using Adobe Audition. It's pretty simple, it's pretty straightforward, but I think you're really going to find it useful and helpful and all sorts of other things if you at all record your voice or use one of these things called a microphone. This, by the way, is the Rode Procaster. It's an amazing little microphone. I love it very much. If you do enjoy this tutorial, make sure you subscribe to my channel so you never miss any other audio or video editing tutorials in the future. Let's jump into Audition now and check this thing out. For the first time in the history of this channel, starting out a tutorial in Adobe Audition, I've got a little voiceover recording of myself that we can use to walk through the workflow I currently use to clean up and make my audio sound better and cleaner. Here, check this out, a little before and after. The master has failed more times than the beginner has even tried. The master has failed more times than the beginner has even tried. So I'll open the audio file that I want to work on. I've got a couple of takes here in this audio file, and I happen to know that the first take is not the right one. It's not the one that I want. I'm interested in this audio over here on the right side of my audio waveform. I'm going to drag a selection over it while making sure to leave a few seconds of extra time at the beginning. This is so I have a sound floor that I can use for reducing background noise a little bit later. With this chunk of audio selected, I'm going to hit Command or Control T to perform a crop, which will dump all the other audio in here and allow me to work on the bit that I want to keep. Now, the general process that I almost always follow, and some of these steps are applicable at all times, and some of them it's just you'll kind of learn what to do and when to do it the more you work with this stuff. But the general process that I almost always follow is light noise reduction initially, normalize the audio to boost the levels, light noise reduction again only if needed, then I'll compress the audio just to flatten out huge peaks and control the quiet bits a little, equalize, and then normalize again, and then if need be after all of that, apply a hard limiter just to control the overall levels and produce a finished sounding piece of audio. Now,
So I'm going to stop it there. I'll drag this back just a tiny bit so you can see that list. We're going to be talking about all of these in this particular outline in this video except normalizing, but we will get to that in the next outline and the next video. But the others we will be talking about. So, noise reduction. Let's talk about that. Noise reduction is to reduce the background noise. Now, in Adobe Audition, you would go to Effects and then choose the selection Noise Reduction Restoration. Okay, in fact, I'm going to go to Adobe Audition here. And we're going to attempt a noise reduction. This is a recording of President John F. Kennedy during the Cuban Missile Crisis. I used this on my radio program a few days ago. And we're going to do some noise reduction on this. It has some pops and hisses and whatnot because it's a very vintage recording. And to some extent, you want to keep some of that, really, but we might like to reduce some of it as well. So I'll play part of it for you.
Shall be the policy of this nation to regard any nuclear missile launched from Cuba against any nation in the Western Hemisphere as an attack by the Soviet Union on the United States.
Okay, so you hear in this area between his words, you hear there's some static that is there. So we choose that area. That's representative of the noise reduction that we want to make, and we go to Effects, Noise Reduction Restoration, Capture Noise Print, which we just did. That's that area there that we're using as a sample. And now noise reduction process. It's indicating, this is the indication of that area that I selected. I'll say capture noise print. Select entire file, because I want to apply this throughout the entire recording. And then apply, which means do it. And you can see that that noise has gone down a good bit.
Shall be the policy of this nation to regard any nuclear missile launched from Cuba against any nation in the Western Hemisphere as an attack by the Soviet Union on the United States.
So that area in here is most noticeable in the quiet places there where he's not speaking. And it did a pretty good job of reducing the noise level there. So there's an example of noise reduction and how that can be done in Adobe Audition. Compression. A compressor is the most fundamental tool in processing. It reduces the high-level audio peaks and raises the overall level without causing hard clipping, which is the distortion that we were talking about a couple of minutes ago. So you are, to some extent with compression, you are reducing the peaks and you're bringing up some of the lows. Compression also can give more fullness to the sound of the recording, in particular someone's voice. If the highest levels are reduced by 6 dB, then the average level can be raised by 6 dB. So you're kind of working from both ends with compression. Let me go to the current slide. And then in Adobe Audition, compression options are found under Effects, and then Amplitude and Compression. And once you get there, I would suggest that you see the default settings. I'm going to go back to Adobe Audition here for you. And I have it's a recording of my voice from the radio program that I do with KETR.
Good morning. Welcome to the Blacklands Cafe.
Now, this is something that I do every time I produce that program. I record the script, which is what you see here, and then a lot of things would be cut into that script in the way of audio pieces. But for my voice, I like to put compression on my voice. So Effects, Amplitude and Compression, multi-band compressor. And here I like here's the presets I was talking about, or the default positions. I like the broadcast preset in the multi-band compressor. It just gives more fullness to the voice. And so I'm now going to say apply. And you see that, first of all, it raises the level. Now I'm going to go, because that's a little higher than I want it to be, and that's okay. Now I'm going to go to amplitude and compression and hard limiter. So now we're going to limit it. And we're going to be talking about limiting here in a moment or two, but hard limiter, one of the presets there is a negative 6 dB, which we've talked about a lot. So I'm going to say limit to a negative 6 dB. I'm very big on the presets. I do not consider myself a master of Adobe Audition or any other audio processing system or hardware. I can do what I need to do effectively. But people that are very, very expert, and they are professional audio producers and per se, may get into the individual controls on this thing. And I think we have a video in which you're going to see that. But I tend to like to find the presets that do what I want to do. So I will say limit to negative 6 dB and then apply. And there we go. And this will have now a fuller sound than it did.
Good morning. Welcome to the Blacklands Cafe. I'm John Mark Dempsey. Have a cup of coffee on the house. It's Monday, November 2nd, National Deviled Egg Day. Sharing a table with us in the cafe this morning, the director of CASA, the Court-Appointed Special Advocates of Hunt County, Lori Cope.
So if we went back, undo the hard limiter, undo the multi-band compressor, and then we listen to this, I think you'll hear the difference.
Good morning. Welcome to the Blacklands Cafe. I'm John Mark Dempsey.
Just a little fuller with the compressor and the limiting. So I find that useful. And I always do that with the production that I do on that program. Limiting. Oh, let's do this. Let's look at the. Before we go to limiting, I do have a video here for you on compression and normalization, and we're going to come back to that subject of normalization in another outline and another video.
I grew up hearing the Baylor name even all the way in Florida.
In this episode, we're going to look at two tools you can use to improve your dialogue audio for film and video, namely normalization and compression. Check this out. All right, here we are in Adobe Audition. We're going to illustrate how to use compressor to improve the sound of your dialogue for film and video. Now, I have a sample clip here. Let me just play through the first portion of this so you can see where we're starting, and then we'll show you how to get to the end. Now, one of the big challenges with recording dialogue is that a lot of times there can be a big difference between the loudest parts and the softest parts. All right, so the first issue we have, of course, is that the dialogue is just way too quiet. And so we really need to bring those levels up. So the first thing we're going to do is go ahead and select all for this clip. And then we're going to come up here to favorites and choose normalize to minus 0.1 dB. Now you'll just use the normalize function in whatever editor you're using, and these same principles apply. You just got to find it in your own editor. This is what they looked like before, and this is what they look like now. So all we really did was all of the loudest parts, we just increased the volume of everything in essence, and we brought the loudest peaks so that they were at 0 dB. Now, if you're not familiar with how to read a waveform monitor like this, 0 dB is the loudest part, and that's represented here at the top and at the bottom. The quietest parts are going to be here in the middle. And then, of course, we have a scale here, so you can see it starts at 0 dB, gets quieter. We got minus 4, 5 dB, minus 7, minus 9. The last number it shows on this particular one is minus 27, and then perfect silence is going to be minus infinity. So you can see the loudest parts are at the tops and the bottom, and the quietest parts are going to be right here in the middle. All right, so that kind of solves one of the problems for us, is that now we've brought the volume up overall. So let's go ahead and play that now so you can see what that sounds like. Now, one of the big challenges with recording dialogue is that a lot of times there can be a big difference between the loudest parts and the softest parts. Okay, so now you can see what that sounds like. Now, what we're going to do is go ahead and apply a compressor to bring these quietest parts and the loudest parts a little bit closer together so that it's a little bit easier on the ears of your viewers, and it makes the dialogue a little more present, and it brings it forward some. So let's go ahead down here to our effects rack. Now, before we apply the compressor, I want to put a hard limiter in here, and that's just really kind of a safety thing. If you don't know what it sounds like when audio clips or distorts, what you should do, yeah, and that's all this is saving us from, it's kind of a safety thing for that. If a waveform tries to exceed 0 dB and go into the plus dB range, that's called clipping, in the digital world at least. So once that happens, what it sounds like is very unpleasant, and it starts to distort. It has a kind of a buzzing noise. Your speakers will be overdriven. So if you don't know what that sounds like and you want to hear what it sounds like, go ahead and record on whatever you have to record, whether that's your camera or an audio recorder. Crank the gain up as high as you can, or close there too. And what you'll do is just record a couple of seconds of dialogue, bring it back to your computer, turn the volume way down on your computer, and play it back to hear what it sounds like. And you can understand what I mean when I say it's pretty unpleasant. So we're putting this hard limiter here just so in case we get a little too aggressive on the compressor settings, it's not going to start clipping. It'll actually cut it off before then. Then we'll come back in here and let's apply a compressor. We're going to use this tube modeled compressor. Which compressor you use is not that important. I want to use this one because it has pretty simple controls and it's pretty...
Now, he could, I'll pull this back just a bit. I'm more familiar with and more comfortable with using the commands, the options up here at the top of the screen, and those are also available up there. So effects is also there. He's pulling it up from this effects rack here, which is a new part of Adobe Audition, this more recent edition of the software. But you can also go up here as I'm more comfortable in doing and pulling your effects down from that location up there at the top of the screen. I think I'll stop it at that point, and you can watch the rest of that if you like, and I think that would be beneficial to you, but we're kind of limited on time. Move on to the subject of limiting. And a limiter is fixed at a maximum amplitude or level. Remember, I applied a hard limiter on the recording of my voice after I put the compression and the broadcast so-called compression on my voice, and I put a limiter on there to limit the level to -6 dB. Limiters are used to prevent hard clipping, which is again what we're most trying to avoid, where the peaks are too high and you get distortion, and as he said in the video, very unpleasant to hear, and increase the average audio levels. Limiting makes commercials sound louder. Sometimes people complain that the commercials are louder than the regular program on television. It's not so much that as the commercials may be produced in such a way that the peaks are more consistent. And so it stays loud throughout the entire commercial instead of having more ups and downs in the audio. So limiting makes commercials sound louder because the high level is consistently maintained. And the levels are uniform then from commercial to commercial, and the master control operator on a television station, for example, doesn't have to continually ride gain. And then in Adobe Audition, you would see hard limiter. I've already shown you this. Under effects, and then amplitude and compression. All right, so let's look at a video here on hard limiting. Oops, have to go to. Here we go.
Hard limiting is an awesome technique used in Adobe Audition to help boost the signal, but not make it go over to where it clips or sounds really harsh. So it's really, really easy to apply. So the first rules is to look on these right side, this numbers. So this is a track that I just did a noise gate to, and now after we've cleaned it up a little bit, we want to boost it. We want to get the sound to the highest level, and so right now the highest peaks, if you look on the right, is sitting around, between -15 and -18. Now, that's too low. If you were to release an audio file at that amount, a decibel level, even if you had the volume turned all the way up, it'd be virtually inaudible. It'd be so low, and we don't want that. We want people to have the option of having it really, really loud, or be able to keep their volume kind of middle ground when they listen to things. So what we do to boost this, so it's easy. You just go to Effects, Amplitude and Compression, Hard Limiter. Now, how do you decide the amount of input boost to give it? So, if you see this for the first time, you're going to see the settings like this. So if you look into the right-hand side, like I mentioned, between -15 and -18 is where this current boost signals is hitting. Now, if you're in the track editing portion of things, you're gonna not want to go over -3 decibels. That's because we want to leave room. We want to leave 3 decibels of space within the audio signal, so that when we're in the final track editing, after you've already mixed everything, then we'll go up to -1. So if you're already done with mixing all the tracks, you have the full audio file mixed with all the voices all in one audio file, that's when you'll want to boost to the -1. But since we're in the track editing process, we only want to go to -3. So it's a simple mathematical equation. So we're looking at -15 here, -3, and so we'll probably go around 12. So we're going to want to boost this. In the input boost, we just put 12. And since we don't want it to go past that -3, right here is where we put the -3.
I'm going to pause him there. Now, again, remember, there are presets there that you may find are very useful. You might experiment with those. I can't open that from here because we're looking at a video, but do note that those presets are there, and I recommend you try those and see if one of those doesn't accomplish what you want it to do. Frequency equalization, or EQ. EQ boosts or cuts certain frequencies, emphasizing some sounds or causing them to recede in prominence. We're dealing here with the frequencies now, as opposed to amplitude. EQ requires a lot of skill and training and is often misused. So I really don't recommend that you do this, other than just to play with it and experiment with it and see what you can learn from it. So one of the slogans having to do with EQ is, if you're not sure, leave it alone. You may do more harm than good, and so don't do it just for the sake of doing it. Another good piece of advice: walk away from a project for a while and then return to it to hear it with fresh ears. Maybe an hour, maybe overnight. Come back, and then you will probably notice some things that you hadn't noticed previously. You'll have a different point of view on whatever the production is. That's a good piece of advice. EQ helps elements in a production to sound brighter, clearer, bigger, fatter. May be used to improve sounds that are muddy or tinny, hollow, or dark. So, but again, EQ is something that is a fairly advanced thing that probably not just anybody should attempt, and again, unless you're just doing it for the purpose of experimentation. In Adobe Audition, you would go to Effects and then Filter and EQ. And I'll show you that. Effects, and then Filter and EQ. And then there are various different EQ options in here. The graphic equalizer, 10 bands, 20 bands, 30 bands, that just has to do with how many choices you have of settings in there. But again, you have various choices in the presets. So let's choose this vocal presence boost and see what that does to my voice. If anything that's all that noticeable.
Welcome to the Blacklands Cafe. I'm John Mark Dempsey.
We'll undo it. Now, do we notice much difference?
Cafe. I'm John Mark Dempsey.
It's very, it's pretty slight. Effects, filter and EQ. Vocal presence cut.
Of CASA, the court-appointed special advocate.
So again, I'm not picking up a lot of difference there. The compressor is more, to me, is more effective, is more desirable in making a difference in how my voice sounds. So I do recommend that. Again, we're talking about frequency equalization, EQ. I just showed you where it is in Adobe Audition. Let's see a short video on this.
Let's have a look at using an EQ plugin to smooth out dialogue audio. And by smoothing out, I mean oftentimes when you record dialogue audio with some sort of condenser microphone, whether that be a shotgun, a lavalier, a cardioid, there can also be a little bit of a harshness, and it just happens with some voices and some microphones. It's not uncommon, but there are some things you can do with EQ to kind of smooth that out and manage that a little bit. Now, let's play a little sample here for you that we're going to use, and we'll let you hear the results as we work through this. So here I'm just going to be working in Adobe Audition. This can work, just to be clear, in any audio editing app, any digital audio workstation. So all of them have EQ plugins. There's nothing magical or special about the one that comes with Adobe Audition, and you can use third-party EQ plugins. So don't get too tied up on the specifics here, but let me kind of show you the principle. Here's the audio we're going to work on. We have this mounted on a K-Tech carbon fiber 12.5-foot boom pole that's internally wired. And at the base of the boom pole, it has a perpendicular XLR output. So, okay, so let's take a look at what we've got here. The first thing we're going to do is go ahead and add an EQ plugin. So I'm going to do that here in my effects rack. You can do it a variety of ways. You can go up here to Effects, choose Filter and EQ, and choose the Parametric Equalizer, and just work on it in real time, or you can apply it to a rack, and if you decide it's not working out, you can always get rid of it. So if you're not showing the rack here, just come up to Window and choose Effects Rack. We'll go ahead and add it here. Again, it's under Filter and EQ, and we're going to use Parametric Equalizer, and we'll set it to its default. Okay, so the idea that we want to use here with an EQ, we want to find problematic frequencies. Again, represented on the graph here. On the left-hand side are the low frequencies, or the low notes, or the low sounds, anything in the bass range. On the right-hand side, treble or high-pitched sounds. And one thing I usually do to make this a little easier for myself is I actually change the range to 30 dB. That makes it a little easier to see what we're doing here. And then what I do is I come to number 2 here. First thing I do is actually boost this by 9 dB. So let's just increase that by 9 dB, and you can see we now have a boost here. And what that means is all these frequencies in the low range here now are being boosted by 9 decibels. So that's actually a little too wide for us. We want to do what's called a notch filter. So that's going to be very narrow. So I'm going to change the Q, which is essentially, just think of it in terms of width. I want to change that setting to 20. Now you can see it's a very skinny kind of boost that we're doing there. It's called a notch.
I'm going to pause that there. Again, this is pretty advanced stuff. I would maybe, if you're interested, play with it some, see what it does, and get more comfortable with it. But I really wouldn't try very much to use that for your projects in this class. Some of the other things we've talked about The noise reduction, perhaps, and the compression and the limiting, I think would be more helpful for you. So next we'll talk about graphic EQ and parametric EQ, and we have some other topics that we're going to get into when we continue this conversation. And so that'll be next time, and we'll see you then.